I also want to ask a question about the CCAs. So the consumer choice folks
Yes.
are going to be regulated by the PUCs because they're offering a retail product.
Well, now the consumer choice aggregator, that is unique to California.
Right.
Um, the problem, and this is where, well,
Well, are they regulated or not by the PUC? I think they must be.
they're kind of in a no man's land, in a place where a lot of other no man's lands already exist, and
Oh
it's unique
no.
to California,
Uh-huh.
which means it has usually some special promise, but also and usually some special peril. And that
Uh-huh.
is the case with these. It's an opportunity. It's basically a scaled opportunity for consumers to choose a generation mix that's different than their incumbent utility, even though the incumbent utility retains some of the universal service distribution and generation mandates, which makes it kind of a mix.
Hmm.
The problem that you always have with a regulated monopoly is it's planned. That's why you have a regulated monopoly, because natural monopoly is about network. Markets do not create networks.
Mm-hmm.
Networks require planning.
And
But
long-term
when you
investment.
have planning, yeah. And when you have planning, if I have to plan for the entire load of the state of Arkansas, I'm creating financial obligations to build stuff. When people leave that system, because these costs are fixed, when they leave the system, what they're leaving is something that was planned for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's cost responsibility issues, and that varies. That depends on what's already planned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you have to plan, if the state puts on the utility the obligation to plan for its load, and it invests money to pay for that load, when some of that load leaves, what it leaves is the same fixed cost with fewer customers, which creates more fixed costs put on the existing customers.
Which would be part of that NEM3 conversation that happened
Yes,
here in California, but we're
yes,
not going to get to that
yes.
today. It's going to be
But it's
something we're going
broader than that. You have that in anything. The other problem, which makes it worse in the electric industry, is because the assets are long lived.
to. Mm-hmm.
That when you
Mm-hmm.
commit for 40 years based on what your load forecast is, if you do, this happens in the real world, in the market world, the same thing happens. When does something become obsolete? What is the life cycle? The
Mm-hmm.
reason that telephones could move so fast is both the switching and interconnection stuff. They had 2 and 3 year life cycles, and
Right.
your cell phone has a 2 or 3 year life cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to recover those costs in 3 years. And then once they're recovered in your pricing structure, well, then there are no stranded, what we call stranded costs, and you can buy the next. But when you have a 40-year life cycle of assets,
Right.
it's different, and it's challenging. It drives the net metering challenge, but it's a bigger challenge. It drives the CCA challenge, because if people leave the committed resources, well, who
Mm.
gets stuck paying for the committed resources? Now,
Right.
as the committed resources run out their useful life, then you come back up for air and you plan for a smaller deal. So that cost shift that exists is temporary, and it's driven by whatever resources were planned to meet your load. Now, when
But
load is growing,
yeah.
you can grow out of that problem, but when load is contracting, you can't.
Right. I mean, we do see here a real conflict. I mean, when you're looking at long-term planning for assets, you're looking at uh, a user base, or as they like to, or I say IOUs like to call them, ratepayers.
Yes.
There's an obligation of load or forecast of load, and then you start seeing decentralized assets like solar, and energy storage and electric vehicles potentially upsetting the
Well,
apple cart of that
yes.
planning.
Well, electric vehicles, though, takes it the other way,
Well,
because that
potentially,
increases load.
potentially right now they're only a
Yeah.
load, but if we start looking not even that far in the future, you could see the vehicles serving the load.
Yes. Yeah.
So
The V to
you're
G thing,
yes.
yeah, is real. Now, but you got to get, you know, that's run. You got crawl and walk before that.
Right,
But
but
when an
before we get
industry
there,
where it takes 5 or 10 years to build anything, if you want to run in 10 years, you got to
yeah,
be thinking about it right now.
yeah, absolutely.